with the debt, the U.S. national debt the way it is now at $36.2 trillion, I don't see them paying that off. It's just too big, and the interest rate to service that debt is just growing exponentially. The question is, will spending stop, and can they taper it? And I just don't think they can stop spending. There's talk of a Department of Government Efficiency to kind of cut costs, but it's to be seen if that will work or not, because you're going to cut some costs there. You'll cut some jobs, government jobs probably, but that is going to make a lot of people unhappy.
Imagine this. It's 2025, and the US government is positioning itself as one of the largest Bitcoin holders on the planet. What once seemed like a wild, futuristic fantasy is now a bold reality, just as Samson Mow predicted. He predicts that the United States may begin adding a staggering 200,000 Bitcoin annually to its balance sheet for the next 5 years. By the end of this bold move, the nation could hold a jaw-dropping 1 million Bitcoin reserve, locked away for 20 years. If this happens, it could forever change the way the world views money and power. Why would the US, drowning in $36.2 trillion of national debt and grappling with skyrocketing interest rates, make such a radical move? According to Mow, it's a desperate yet visionary pivot, a shift away from the crumbling foundation of fiat currency to embrace the decentralized and deflationary nature of Bitcoin. In a world where governments can't seem to stop printing money or controlling spiraling debt, Bitcoin represents a new lifeline. Incorruptible, finite, and a true hedge against economic chaos. But don't expect this to happen without a fight. Such a dramatic shift could send shockwaves through the financial world, upending long-held norms and drawing fierce resistance from those clinging to the old ways. Politicians, bankers, and skeptics will line up to push back, while funding this initiative might demand drastic sacrifices. Think layoffs, restructuring, or painful cuts that could ignite political firestorms. Let's watch clips from Samson Mow's explosive interview to gain more insight. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for additional in-depth content. Thanks for joining us again. Enjoy the video.
You kind of hit one of them, which is God candles, $10,000 candles on the daily chart in one day. And the next step, I think, is the Omega candle, which is a $100,000 candle on the daily. Hopefully green, but possibly red. Like we had a red Godzilla candle recently, right? It went down like 13,000. So it can go both ways. But the trend, I believe, is that we're going to see Bitcoin become much more turbulent in bigger swings up and down as we go towards $1 million per coin and beyond that, because this is sort of price discovery. And I happen to lean towards the side of green candles, because the way I look at the demand and supply imbalance is just so skewed that it makes me fearful that it's just going to come all at once, and we're going to see this Omega candle just rise up nonstop for a whole day as people pile on into Bitcoin. Because you can see, like, even though we're up here, we're not really moving that quickly yet, and the demand from ETFs and from MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor, it just seems ridiculously skewed. Like there is 20x, sometimes more demand just from ETFs in a given day. And that does not seem sustainable to me. And there are some theories that OGs are selling, but I really don't think that that's necessarily the case. It could just be people moving and migrating coins to new wallets or to multi-sig or improving security. So I just think there is a supply shock coming and nobody sees it coming. And one day there just won't be enough Bitcoin, and that will just trigger this recursive demand shock coupled with this supply shock that just shoots us straight up vertically. The whole concept of cycles is interesting. I don't really believe in cycles. And before I get into it, I just want to say, like, there has been talk of a super cycle where Bitcoin just goes up and doesn't stop. I think it'll come. There will be fluctuations, there will be volatility, but it seems like the concept of cycles is not something that is in line with Bitcoin. We've had 3 cycles, I guess, that look similar. But the first cycle, like the first 4-year period of Bitcoin, the first epoch, I think you can't really count that. That's just early price discovery and formation of the Bitcoin price, right? It's very, very immature and very fragmented market. So you can say, like, there's been 3 coin tosses and they kind of look similar. But why would Bitcoin continue on mirroring 4-year periods ahead of it when adoption is exponential? I just don't see why that would be the case. So eventually the cycle, or what appears to be a cycle, should break to the upside. And I guess this is what Omega is about. It's just a breaking of the cycle. And I think an Omega candle would definitely break some of the models out there, like maybe stock to flow, and definitely, what's the other one?
Power law.
Power.
What are your thoughts about like those charts, the power law and stock to flow?
They're useful as a guidance, but I think saying that Bitcoin is going to follow this exact model is very dangerous, because Bitcoin just does its own thing. Like, it's not like people were thinking to, or there are people were being recommended to trade against the power law. Like, when you get up here, sell everything, and then you buy back cheaper.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite dangerous, because
I agree.
you could never buy back again cheaper, right? There is no guarantee. And I think you just have to look at the writing on the wall, which is adoption seemingly is growing exponentially. Like, the US, a world superpower, is mulling over creation of strategic Bitcoin reserves and significantly adopting Bitcoin in a major way. And I believe that's going to trigger a lot of follow-on behavior from other countries too. Like, there is discourse now in Russia to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and other countries too. So it's really just a matter of time. And when the US does something, everyone's just going to pile on. With the debt, the US national debt the way it is now at $36.2 trillion, I don't see them paying that off. It's just too big, and the interest rate to service that debt is just growing exponentially. And the question is, will spending stop, and can they taper it? And I just don't think they can stop spending. There's talk of a Department of Government Efficiency to kind of cut costs, but it's to be seen if that will work or not, because you're going to cut some costs there. You'll cut some jobs, government jobs probably, but that is going to make a lot of people unhappy. And what that leads to is that they vote in the other guys next term.
Samson Mow envisions a thrilling future for Bitcoin, marked by the explosive Omega candle, a $100,000 daily price surge. Fueled by a supply-demand imbalance, Mow predicts this dramatic leap as institutions, ETFs, and even nations like the US and Russia consider Bitcoin reserves. Rejecting traditional cycle theories, he highlights exponential adoption as the driving force behind Bitcoin's unpredictable growth. With supply shocks looming and global interest soaring, the Omega candle could signal Bitcoin's transformative leap toward unprecedented highs. Samson Mow envisions a world shifting to a Bitcoin standard as fiat systems falter under inflation and debt. He highlights Bitcoin's incorruptible ledger as a safeguard for preserving human time and energy, contrasting it with the devaluation risks of fiat currencies. However, Mow warns of chaos if the transition happens too quickly, drawing lessons from India's 2016 cash crisis. With the US and other nations eyeing Bitcoin reserves, education, and strategic planning are vital to navigating this transformative financial shift. Let's watch more clips from the interview.
I'm really bearish on the world being able to survive in a fiat standard, and they absolutely need to go to a Bitcoin standard, because any attempt to fix the current problems through cost cutting or austerity or anything is going to push people to the other side because everyone wants free stuff. So the window of opportunity to actually fix something is very narrow, kind of like we're talking about before we started the podcast. When we at Jan3 try to engage with the government, we have like a 2-year window for any given administration to do something. The first year, they are not well prepared. They're still, building out everything and preparing and getting into place. Then you have the last 2 years, and then you have the next few years, and then you have the last year, where either they're on their way out and they don't want to do anything, or they are preparing for re-election and they don't want to take any risks. So even within a 4-year term of any government, there is only really half of it that is viable to push something forward. And it's the same thing like when you're trying to fix the country. Like you have a very narrow window because you're going to have to deal with the next election soon after. So I guess to answer your question, I believe they have to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve because the dollar is diminishing, and really the really only net buyer of treasuries is Tether, right? Stablecoin issuing. China is tapering, and the BRICS countries are probably going to taper and step away from the dollar as well. So then, if there's no demand, what are you going to do? You have to do something because the U.S. is just like is broke. Basically, they're massively in debt, and there's no one willing to buy the debt. Yeah, I think strategic Bitcoin reserve is definitely on the cards, and even possibly more. Like Bitcoin as legal tender, Bitcoin used as money. I tweeted about it last night that the total holdings of Bitcoin in the U.S. could be somewhere from 15 to 25%, between the ETFs, between the corporations, between large holdings, between the holdings of the US itself, and the Winklevoss twins, Tim Draper. There's a lot of Bitcoin in the US. So in one fell swoop, they could effectively make the US a massive superpower in terms of Bitcoin if they demonetize gold. Because they're also the U.S. is the largest holder of gold, so if they nuke that in favor of Bitcoin, that changes the dynamic massively. And you have to look at it from the perspective of they have political adversaries that have a lot of gold, and this could deal a massive blow against those adversaries that have been stacking gold diligently for the last couple decades, who also are stepping away from the US dollar. Money is just human time and energy. It's a way that you can store your time and energy for the future. So you can work harder, produce more goods, and your goods might be perishable, right? It could be fruits or vegetables, but you can sell them for money and then store the money for the future. So I wouldn't say it's like a battery, but it's a way for you to store in this ledger. And I believe the ledger has to not be corruptible by anything, because that is how people end up stealing from other people, right? When you have central banks that can print money, they can effectively steal your time as a person by removing value from the instrument you stored your time and energy in, which is, for the most part, digitized or paper pieces of fiat. So that's the biggest thing. Money is really a way that you can motivate people to do something, right? Because it is valuable. It is stored value over time. And being able to print money just lets you manipulate and control the population. I believe it's good for the world to adopt Bitcoin sooner rather than later for the reasons we've discussed. But the other major point that a lot of people forget is that the transition into a Bitcoin standard is going to be very chaotic. If it's too rapid, it's sort of a demonetization event. The old currency starts to become useless and everyone is scrambling to get into Bitcoin. And that can entail a lot of human suffering. So back in 2016, I think there was a demonetization event in India where they remove, I think, $5 and $10 rupee notes out of circulation. And, a lot of people died, actually. I think maybe a dozen or so people died from exposure or being unable to pay for medical procedures because the hospital didn't want to take the old currency, right? So these things can be very chaotic. So imagine that type of event, but not just for a 5 and 10 rupee note, but for, all the money of a country. And without knowledge of how Bitcoin works, you can see the opportunity for scammers. Like, okay, the Japanese yen is worthless now. Give it to me, and I'll give you, Bcash. That could definitely happen, or worse, right?
Yeah.
So I think education is so important to make people understand how Bitcoin works, even at a very basic level.
As global interest in Bitcoin intensifies, discussions about a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve have taken center stage, reflecting Samson Mow's prediction of Bitcoin's pivotal role in reshaping global finance. A recent report by Blockware Solutions forecasts Bitcoin reaching $150,000 in bearish conditions or soaring to $400,000 in a bullish scenario this year. Central to this vision is the proposed reserve, where the U.S. would accumulate significant Bitcoin holdings, positioning itself as a leader in the digital asset economy. Blockware emphasizes that Bitcoin's future price depends on economic and political factors. A bullish scenario might unfold if the U.S. not only establishes the reserve, but doubles down on Bitcoin acquisitions. Coupled with dovish Federal Reserve policies and increased corporate adoption, this could propel Bitcoin into unprecedented price territory. However, Mow warns of challenges. Transitioning from fiat to Bitcoin could be chaotic if mismanaged, potentially leading to financial instability, akin to India's 2016 demonetization. Education is vital to smooth this shift and protect against scams during such transformations. As fiat systems falter under inflation and debt, Bitcoin's incorruptible nature becomes increasingly appealing. Whether through strategic reserves or broader adoption, Bitcoin's trajectory underscores its potential to redefine global finance, offering both opportunities and challenges. The question is no longer if Bitcoin will play a pivotal role, but how governments and institutions will navigate the complexities of this transformative journey. As we wrap up, do you believe Bitcoin can offer a lifeline to tackle the mounting national debt, or will it spark more controversy than consensus? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Share this video and hit the like button. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.